How could this grand hierarchy of gods and spirits have anything in common with the superstitious mumblings of the black peoples of Inner Africa? Wandering among the treasures of the Cairo Museum, it's easy to think of the Egypt of the pharaohs as a civilization complete within itself, owing little or nothing to outside influences from whatever source, entirely its own creation. And I imagine that most visitors conclude as they listen to their guides that a statue such as this of the young king Tutankhamun may have turned very black in the course of centuries, but could not have been a black man in the first place.
The liar knows what lie he told. You see what I'm saying? So even if I made it deceitful and I made you think that the answer is over here, but the answer is really over here, I'm still going to be looking over here. Me, the one that tricked, because I know this is the right answer. Black people have lost their identity, but our oppressors have not lost our identity. That's just why they chopped those noses off of the Pharaoh and the Sphinx in Egypt in the first place, is because without this nose, we can tell you this is whoever it is.
Who were the ancient Egyptians? The interesting thing about that question is, before the late 1800s, it was well known by scholars and historians who they were. For example, in 1787, in a book called Travels in Egypt and Syria, Count Volney, a traveler and historian among other things, wrote,
"All the Egyptians have a bloated face, puffed up eyes, flat nose, thick lips. In a word, the true face of the mulatto. I was tempted to attribute it to the climate, but when I visited the Sphinx, its appearance gave me the key to the riddle. On seeing that head, typically Negro in all its features, I remembered the remarkable passage where Herodotus says, 'As for me, I judge the Colchians to be a colony of the Egyptians, because, like them, they are black with woolly hair.' In other words, the ancient Egyptians were true Negroes of the same type as all native-born Africans. That being so, we can see how their blood, mixed for several centuries with that of the Greeks and Romans, must have lost the intensity of its original color, while retaining nonetheless the imprint of its original mold."
I think the quote by Herodotus he was referring to was written in the book Histories 2, where he writes,
"There can be no doubt that the Colchians are an Egyptian race. Before I heard any mention of the fact from others, I had remarked it myself. My own conjectures were founded first on the fact that they are black-skinned and have woolly hair."
The problem of the most monstrous falsification in the history of humanity by modern historians could not have been posed better than Volney did. No one could have been abler than he to render justice to the black race by recognizing its role as mankind's pioneer guide on the road to civilization. His conclusions should have ruled out the subsequent invention of a hypothetical white pharaonic race that allegedly imported Egyptian civilization from Asia at the start of the historical period. In fact, that hypothesis is difficult to reconcile with the reality of the Sphinx, which is the image of a pharaoh having the head of a black. That image is there for all to see. It can hardly be discounted as an atypical document, nor relegated to the storeroom of a museum to remove it from the dangerous meditation of those susceptible of accepting factual evidence.
What most people overlook when dealing with ancient Egypt and North Africa is the population replacement that has taken place due to several invasions of Africa. North Africa was invaded by the Persians, the Greeks, the Romans, and the Arabs. These people are not indigenous to North Africa. In the same way that most modern Americans aren't indigenous Americans, most modern North Africans aren't indigenous Africans. This should be obvious to any intelligent person who knows human history. In the book Travels in Egypt and Syria, Count Volney also wrote,
"Just think that this race of black men, today our slave and object of our scorn, is the very race to which we owe our arts, sciences, and the use of speech. Imagine, finally, that it is in the midst of people who call themselves the greatest friends of liberty and humanity that one has approved the most barbarous slavery and questioned whether black men have the same kind of intelligence as whites.
And lastly, he wrote,
There, in Egypt, a people now forgotten, discovered, while others were yet barbarians, the elements of the arts and sciences. A race of men now rejected from society for their sable skin and frizzled hair, founded on the study of the laws of nature, those civil and religious systems which still govern the universe.
All the gods which were worshipped in Africa, which were worshipped in Sumeria, were actually African gods.
Same with Egypt?
Yes, sir. Ra, even today, amongst the Botswana people here, the name Ra means father. And the oldest warlike goddess was in Egypt, Hathor or Hathor. In South Africa, she was known as Mahato, the mother of the great footprint.
Is that the footprint you showed me once?
Yes, sir. Africa gave the world its civilization.
In 60 BCE, in Bibliotheca Historica, Book 1, by Diodorus Siculus, the Greek historian, he wrote,
The Ethiopians conceived themselves to be of greater antiquity than any other nation, and it is probable that, born under the sun's path, its warmth may have ripened them earlier than other men. They suppose themselves also to be the inventors of divine worship, of festivals, of solemn assemblies, of sacrifices, and every other religious practice. They affirm that the Egyptians are one of their colonies. They have, like the Egyptians, 2 species of letters, hieroglyphics and the alphabet. But among the Egyptians, the first was known only to the priests, and by them transmitted from father to son, whereas both species were common among the Ethiopians.
This quote also relates to what Count Voni said in 1792 when he wrote,
It would be easy to multiply citations upon this subject, from all which it follows that we have the strongest reasons to believe that the country neighboring to the tropic was the cradle of the sciences, and of consequence, that the first learned nation was a nation of blacks. For it is incontrovertible that by the term Ethiopians, the ancients meant to represent a people of black complexion, thick lips, and woolly hair.
In relation to this, long before Count Voni, Lucian, an ancient Greek writer, wrote,
The Ethiopians were the first who invented the science of the stars and gave names to the planets, not at random and without meaning, but descriptive of the qualities which they conceived them to possess. And it was from them that this art passed, still in an imperfect state, to the Egyptians.
Now keep in mind that so far I haven't made any claims about who I think the ancient Egyptians were. I have simply quoted ancient Greek and Roman historians for the most part, including the father of Western history, Herodotus, who actually went to ancient Egypt.
Eyewitnesses of that period formally affirmed that the Egyptians were blacks. On several occasions, Herodotus insists on the Negro character of the Egyptians and even uses this for indirect demonstrations. For example, to prove that the flooding of the Nile cannot be caused by melting snow, he cites, among other reasons he deems valid, the following observation. It is certain that the natives of the country are black with the heat. To demonstrate that the Greek oracle is of Egyptian origin, Herodotus advances another argument. Lastly, by calling the dove black, they, the Dodonians, indicated that the woman was Egyptian. The doves in question symbolize 2 Egyptian women allegedly kidnapped from Thebes to found the oracles of Dodona and Libya. To show that the inhabitants of Colchis were of Egyptian origin and had to be considered a part of Sesostris' army who had settled in that region, Herodotus says, the Egyptians said that they believed the Colchians to be descended from the army of Sesostris. My own conjectures were founded, First, on the fact that they are black-skinned and have woolly hair. Diodorus of Sicily writes, "The Ethiopians say that the Egyptians are one of their colonies which was brought into Egypt by Osiris. They even allege that this country was originally underwater, but that the Nile, dragging much mud as it flowed from Ethiopia, had finally filled it in and made it a part of the continent. They add that from them, as from authors and ancestors, the Egyptians get most of their laws. It is from them that the Egyptians have learned to honor kings as gods and bury them with such pomp. Sculpture and writing were invented by the Ethiopians. The Ethiopians cite evidence that they are more ancient than the Egyptians, but it is useless to report that here. If the Egyptians and Ethiopians were not of the same race, Diodorus would have emphasized the impossibility of considering the former as a colony, i.e. fraction of the latter, and the impossibility of viewing them as forebears of the Egyptians.
Aeschylus in the Suppliants has the character Danaus say of an Egyptian ship, "I can see the Egyptian crew with their black limbs and their white tunics." This is 480 BCE. He's writing. I can see them. Herodotus says it is a fact that the Colchians are an Egyptian race because like them they have black skin and woolly hair. Aristotle says, speaking derogatorily about Egyptians, say those who are too black are coward, as witness the Egyptians and the Ethiopians. The word too, I translate sometimes as very. You are very, because Aristotle, just quickly, Aristotle was always talking about what the median, the mean. That you have to be not too black, not too white, the mean. And his whole idea was that males were, from Greek males, were more in the mean. They were not too white. They were not like the Egyptians and the Ethiopians, very black. But he used that word because he knew that the Egyptians and the Ethiopians were the same. He was really making a derogatory statement, but it gave us the idea that he understood that the Egyptians were black people and they were black skinned. Apollodorus says that Egyptos conquered the country of the black-footed ones and called it Egypt after himself.
While in the present day, many people claim ancient Egypt was white or it was neither white nor black, ancient Greek and Roman historians had no problem acknowledging that the ancient Egyptians were black. Of course, over time, ancient Egypt was invaded by many different people, as I've already mentioned, but even at the time of Herodotus, which is after at least a couple of invasions, they were still black, or at least a majority black, according to Greek historians, many of whom saw them with their own eyes. A good question to ask ourselves is, if the original ancient Egyptians were not black, why would all the quotes I've just provided exist?
The liar knows what lie he told. You see what I'm saying? So even if I made it deceitful and I made you think that the answer is over here, but the answer is really over here, I'm still going to be looking over here. Me, the one that tricked, because I know this is the right answer. Black people have lost their identity, but our oppressors have not lost our identity. That's just why they chop those noses off of the Pharaoh and the Sphinx in Egypt in the first place, is because without this nose, we can tell you this is whoever it is. But with that nose, it can only be. Why would somebody vandalize a whole face and only vandalize one part? Nobody wanted to knock an eye off or take an ear off or no chins missing. No, just the nose. Because it's a brand. It's a brand.